Unforgivable, belongs behind bars, and prosecute him are just some of the messages being shared by Americans today after it was revealed Dr. Anthony Fauci, who is the nation's top infectious disease expert and chief medical advisor to the White House, admitted he can't remember reviewing any studies or data that supported masking children during the pandemic. Republicans shared the transcript of their sit-down interview with Dr. Fauci from earlier this year, where he also revealed the 6-foot social distancing rule sort of just appeared and he couldn't recall how it came about. He added he wasn't aware of studies that supported the social distancing rule because such studies would be very difficult to do. Well, unfortunately, that type of transparency that we seem to only be getting now was desperately needed 4 years ago, because as we all know, the damage has been done. And this confession from Dr. Fauci provides a little comfort to the millions of Americans who are locked up inside their homes and who thought they were doing the right thing by masking their children. And the toll that these types of insane restrictions had on adolescents is still being felt. One National Institute of Health study labelled the impact of masks on students' literacy and learning very negative. Another NIH study found that the impacts from social distancing contributed to depression, generalised anxiety, acute stress, and intrusive thoughts. Dr. Anthony Fauci also revealed that the theory that COVID began at the Wuhan Institute of Virology is a real possibility, and it could have been a lab leak. Dr. Anthony Fauci will publicly testify for the first time since he retired in 2022 today before the House Select Subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic, where he will be grilled by a Republican-led committee. In 2021, Sky News host Sharri Markson revealed in her documentary that Dr. Anthony Fauci was up to his neck funding coronavirus research in Wuhan.
As you know, I've been investigating Anthony Fauci's involvement in funding coronavirus research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology for months now. Some of these discoveries I have already reported. I found out that his agency had funded 60 projects at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. I found out that he wrote a paper back in 2012 where he argued that gain-of-function research, that's genetically manipulating coronaviruses to make them even more dangerous and more transmissible, Fauci said that this was worth the risk of a pandemic. And he even funded research, his agency funded coronavirus research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in conjunction with the Chinese military. I mean, this is just astonishing and unthinkable. Why would America be funding research at a Wuhan lab in conjunction with the Chinese military? Fauci was up to his neck funding research in Wuhan. And it's something he himself, eventually, just a couple of months ago, had to admit.
It was incumbent upon us to study the animal-human interface and to understand what potential these viruses have of infecting humans, which then might damage the United States. So please let me finish. So you don't want to go to Hoboken, New Jersey, or to Fairfax, Virginia, to be studying the bat-human interface that might lead to an outbreak. So you go to China.
This just shows how incredibly stupid Anthony Fauci is. If there's a contagious coronavirus outbreak in China, obviously it's going to affect the rest of the world. And that's exactly what we've seen with this pandemic. What sort of public health official doesn't understand that outbreaks can go global? It's unthinkable that he is still the top medical advisor to the president. He should have been sacked by now. I found out when I was writing my book, What Really Happened in Wuhan, that Fauci didn't even tell his own boss, and that's the Health Secretary, Alex Azar, that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was genetically manipulating coronaviruses, or that this research was funded by America, or again still, he didn't even tell him that the ban on gain-of-function research had been lifted in the United States. Instead, he rammed through the decision to lift that Obama-era ban on gain-of-function research. Now, here's what's new. In the documentary that airs on Sky News tomorrow night, I ask President Donald Trump about this. I ask him if in the early days of the pandemic, when Fauci was sitting there in the Oval Office, in every single meeting as the virus was breaking out, if he ever spoke up and told him that he actually knows that there's a lab in Wuhan called the Wuhan Institute of Virology that was engaging in this research, that was genetically manipulating coronaviruses, creating these Frankenstein-like viruses. Here's a sneak peek. Have a look at what Trump says. Did he ever once mention to you that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was genetically manipulating coronaviruses?
Well, no, he didn't. And, you know, Anthony's been in government for many, many years. He's a bureaucratic kind of a guy, a very great promoter. I give him an A+ as a promoter and probably a C or a D as a doctor.
So that's former President Donald Trump admitting that Anthony Fauci stayed silent in Oval Office meetings at the start of the pandemic. He kept quiet on everything he knew about the type of risky research that was underway at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Never mentioned that his agency was funding this and that he actually knew a whole lot about it. In the documentary, we also hear from Chinese defectors who amazingly first discovered that there was a coronavirus spreading in Wuhan back in October 2019. Wei, did you have any sense that the intelligence agencies in the United States in November 2019 were taking this seriously, that there may be a virus spreading in Wuhan?
I felt they were not as concerned as I was, so I tried my best to provide more detail and information. They may not believe a government of a country would do something like that. So I kept repeating myself. In an effort, I tried to persuade them.